Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF everything in that shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome and welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
Hey, this is Ben.
on Spoiled Rotten.
Oh, my hell.
Boom. We are here to talk about the, in Canada, Netflix show Titans. You know, it's supposed to be like Teen Titans, but more grown up. And we're just going to do season 1 for now, but obviously, as we've hinted at with other shows, we're gonna keep going with this. Yeah, season 1. I think revisiting it, the thing that was important for me was to realize, all right, this show is not objectively bad. It's just not for me at all. And I think that we talked not with I know we talked about Doom Patrol, and I feel like the complaints I have about this show probably line up with the things I liked about Doom Patrol.
Okay.
So so if people hear like it sounds like I'm being a hypocrite, I think my issue is, I've said that on the podcast before, the Dick Grayson in particular, not just Robin, is like my second favorite comic book character ever. So I've got very strong opinions about what I like about him, which seem to be completely non-existent in this show, versus Doom Patrol, where I don't know any of those characters. So
Right.
I can enjoy what they're doing there, like the edginess there a lot more because it's new to me.
No, it's funny because I'm, a little bit polar opposite from you in that regard, and that Dick Grayson, Robin, is one of my least favorite characters. And this version of him, what they do with him here is actually like, oh, all right, I'm a little bit more interested in this version of Dick Grayson, right? Well, he's like rough around the edges, and I get what you're saying. Like he's clearly not what the other iteration of Dick Grayson is. I'm just like, this is something I can actually bite my teeth into and understand a little bit better with what they're trying to do here. I will say also, before going deep dive into the season, that like this is not I don't really have that much of a history with Teen Titans. Like when people were like, "Oh, this is not at all like Teen Titans Go," I'm like, "You're probably right. That seemed a lot more
Oh
fun,
yeah.
a lot more upbeat, a lot more. This is not that, and that's
So
why I'm interested in it."
I never watched Teen Titans or Teen Titans Go. Like
Yeah.
I know those are comic runs, not Teen Titans Go, but Teen Titans is a comic run, obviously. But I didn't watch those two shows. I watched Young Justice, which felt like it was a better use of time. I think they kind of hint at it here with Donna Troy being like, "Hey, like us sidekicks need to stick together." Like that was basically the whole point of Young Justice, and felt like the right way to go about using these characters. Obviously, that show already exists, so I'm not looking for them to replicate that with Titans. I just think that my main issues with it are because they did with what they did with Dick Grayson. I'm literally interested in anyone but him. Like, and it's always the like characters that are like side characters in this show. So like Hawk and Dove, I'm like, yeah, if it's an episode about them, I'm in.
Yeah.
When they did Doom Patrol, even though it really didn't line up with what they did for the TV show, which is fine. That's clearly like a backdoor pilot. Even that, I was like, yep, I'm interested in these characters as well, and I like their show. Obviously, it's not a complete transfer. They definitely switched some things around, switched around how people work.
Yeah.
Specifically, Negative Man is just not the same character, and it is the same voice actor, but not the same actor. It's actually a black person who is my cousin's friend is Negative Man in Titans, and obviously they've went with two white guys in the actual show
in Doom Patrol. Yeah. Okay.
And as such, I feel like it's just completely different aura to that character.
Oh, absolutely.
But we're not here to talk about Doom Patrol anyway. But yeah, I just think that I will plainly state what my issue with the portrayal of Dick Grayson is, and I'm not saying that he can only ever be portrayed the way I like. It's just I'm just giving a reason why it didn't work for me. I'm not saying it sucks because they didn't do this. My point. So my thing is, when you meet Dick Grayson in Teen Titans, not Titans, but like the comic run of Teen Titans, yes, he is mad at Batman, and he is. This is a reaction to how he felt he was treated by Batman, and he was legitimately angry at him. I still think it's really embarrassing that he says "fuck Batman," especially since he's not saying it to anyone really, and it kind of is emblematic of the edgelord thing they're trying to do with the show, which doesn't really work for me. But that is the sentiment he has, so I get why that line is there. It's just not great execution to me, but that he is on that run. So I'm not saying no, he needs to be nice and like everyone, but the point of Dick Grayson is that he won't become Bruce Wayne. He is that much more optimistic. He actually threatens to be a better Batman than Bruce Wayne, which is, I like when it's written that like that is evident to Bruce Wayne, so that affects how he treats Dick Grayson. But that's not something that leaves. He can be mad at Batman, but he's not mad at the world, and he has better coping mechanisms than Bruce Wayne, making him potentially a better Batman than Bruce Wayne. This show is just like, nah, he's just Bruce Wayne now. It's too bad. Like, Bruce Wayne screwed him over. That's too bad. I'm like, no, well, all right. Well, not for me. Just, I don't enjoy this take on it, because you can still have a lot of the stuff they do with him here without that kernel of, well, yeah, it's just too late for him because he's so messed up from being with Bruce Wayne.
Yeah. I can certainly appreciate that. I definitely see what you mean. And I think this is one of the curse that a lot of DC shows have, including like Arrow and all that kind of stuff, is that they're like, oh, why is this character just Batman in a different costume, right? And because the character of Batman as we know him in modern day is so iconic and just so whatever, that I don't even know if these writers are aware of the fact that they're writing that. But I do like this from the perspective of, okay, I want to know why he's mad at him, and it gets so personal with him because you do see him not be able to hold back and cross the line, all that kind of stuff. And to me, I like it because it's actually deep diving into that whole, this is why I had to leave, this is what I'm afraid of becoming, all that kind of stuff, and getting to the point of, you're right to say reaction, because that reaction is, it's so far the other way that I'm hoping that in season 2 he finds the needle to move back to the middle ground where it resembles, not like you said, the cheeriness or whatever that I dislike with Robin, but it's the idea of, okay, does he have a better moral ground than Batman? Because Batman just has the one rule, which throughout the show it's just like, oh, like especially toward the end, it's like, oh, he's unhinged and all that kind of stuff. He's like, does he even have that rule anymore? And that's where I'm like, oh, okay, this is where Dick Grayson is actually Dick Grayson. He's like, he's got a better moral compass than Batman in this regard, but it's because they're pushing both of them so far that it's just like, all right, well, what's actually happening here? I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I think what I will say works for Dick Grayson for me. Obviously, again, I'm not trying to say it can only be this way or else it's bad. What worked for me was some of the brief moments he has with Rachel/Raven, where you can see him being like, no, this is the way Bruce would do it. I'm going to do it the opposite way. Like, those types of reactions make more sense to me. But the fact that ultimately, and I can say this because that's part of Raven's power, she makes a point of being like, no, you're lying, you are going to leave. Or I'm like, see, that's the distinctly not Dick Grayson stuff, which is being a liar like that. I don't think if they wanted to play, oh, he got too violent and that was his reaction, which I think that is part of what they're playing up, sure. But the whole, like, he's going to be just as deceptive as Batman, I'm like, that just doesn't work for me on a fundamental level. I think you can show him in an altered state, obviously, because that's the point of him breaking off and doing his own team. But the point is he broke off to do a more overt team. the whole point was it is overtly, I am bringing family together instead of the covert way Batman does it. It is like, no, I'm bringing people together because this is what I wanted. I wanted partners. I wanted to like be on the same page, and to be like, well, no, he's just going to do the Batman stuff with them. I'm like, ah. Or even the fact that like this show is implying that there was a version of the team before, and I'm like, oh, this is the Batman versus Superman issue of being like, oh, we're doing it at the end of the road, or like stuff happened that you didn't get to see, and I'm like, it just felt like a waste of Dick Grayson for this first season. I mean, we now know that this show has 4 seasons, so they could have built up to something, but it's just like, oh, well, he's at the edge of what you can do with him at this point.
Yeah, he hasn't found his way back to that middle ground like I was talking to earlier, and you're right. Those moments do make it cringe for me, where I'm like, oh, why are you going ahead and lying? And then the moment he's like, when he corrects and be like, no, you're gonna be alone. You're gonna do that. I'm like, now you've overcorrected. Now you're pushing her away, and it's this weird back and forth of like he can never figure it out, and like. I think one of the weird things about this series is like, oh yeah, he doesn't play well with others, referring to that like the partner that he gets assigned. She straight up dies, and he's like, oh well, like it barely even affects him. Like that's shit to me. I'm like, no, show me that you were trying to put on some sort of tough guy image facade, but that you were still affected to me. You know what I mean? It's the idea of like, you're absolutely right. That stone wall that he has throughout the entire first season is not appealing. But what he's working through, and the themes that he's working through, and the trauma that he's working through in that regard, to me, are interesting, and that's why I like it. But I would not be like, this is perfect. This is peak television. It's definitely needs to find its footing for what to do with Robin, for sure.
I mean, I've seen all of seasons 1 through 3. Right. And I can say this is my least favorite season. So if we're revisiting this, I'll be way more warm about the show as we go on. This is definitely my least favorite season. I
get that. Yeah.
I think, as I said, the idea that they're not truly a team, and he's constantly rejecting the idea that they're a team, even when they're like, we are a team. He's like, no, we're just people who need to go. I'm like, oh my God, just don't call him Dick Grayson then. I think that was the other thing, is that literally every other character had the optimism that you would expect from Dick Grayson. Even Raven, who's supposed to be like emo goth, is like, it's a change, but I think it's a change that works for how they wanted to portray what I hope was intentional internal battles for Dick, when he's like, no, I'm not treating this kid the right way, or whatever.
Right.
But even she's more optimistic. Like, I think they definitely darkened Starfire. She doesn't, from what I've seen of Starfire, isn't that dark. I mean, they did the whole she doesn't know who she is. So I guess she is more fun when she's just living her life. Yep. But, and obviously Beast Boy, he's darkened too, but at least has that optimism. I feel like even Hank, like Hawk, is pretty optimistic, or at least not a big downer, considering what they showed you he went through, like the sexual abuse and like, his brother dying, and that's fine. Like they decided that's where they were going to put the more optimistic outlook on life after going through traumatic things.
Right.
Whatever. It's just, it felt like a missed opportunity for me, even if I didn't have the connection I had to Dick Grayson, to be like, well, everyone is going to be better at this than him in terms of how they manage the things they share. Any stressor he has, other than they weren't partners with Batman, they share as well. Like, Donna has Wonder Woman as a part, and in that sense, it's more the being in the shadow of this god. Obviously, Wonder Woman, I'm assuming, doesn't treat her partner like Batman treats his partner, but they all have similar issues, and they're able to come off as people with better coping skills. So that's how I'll put it. Better coping skills. And again, I don't need everyone to have better coping skills. It just felt like this character is a specific way in certain writing, so he would lend himself to being the character that brings people together with his coping skills.
Yeah. I like what you said about the discussion of Hawk and that mirroring of Robin, because you're right. Every time that Hawk's on the screen, Hawk and Dove, when
Hmm.
it's one of their episodes, I'm like glued to it, and it's
Hmm.
just the most fascinating thing. And I couldn't believe they took it there with his origin, right? But for you to point out, it's like, yeah, it's better coping skills because fundamentally, they all have been traumatized. That's the point, and they're all bringing it together. And the thing that I like about in these discussions about trauma and groups being formed with it, it's you go one or two paths. And like Hawk, he chose the empathetic, optimistic path of like, I'm going to try to help others and heal others and all that kind of stuff, right?
Hmm.
So, sorry. With Robin, he's being like defensive and sheltering and just like it's all about me. All that kind of stuff, and
Hmm.
going into the exact point that Batman did and doing the exact same things that Batman did. It's just like how different are you right now? And I like the fact that Hawk exists to show him that there is that kind of different way to approach it. You're on this path, get on mine, but without being preachy about it, right? Just
Yeah, Hawk
showing up
is
by comparison.
more jealous of uh, Dick because
Oh,
they
100%.
share a romantic interest in
Yeah, that
Dove.
triangle. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that's my thing. One other thing I liked that again wasn't him being cheery and was him being upset was how he reacted to feeling replaced by Jason Todd. And it's not any dialogue he says. I just really liked on his face he was able to portray the hurt.
Mhm.
Uh, I felt like he was leading with hurt and less jealousy, but obviously the jealousy is there. But the hurt of being like, ah, you really replaced me. I can't believe
Yeah.
you did that.
Yeah.
Doesn't
Yeah.
really matter
And
who this guy is. They on purpose make him so annoying, but
right.
which adds to the sting. But it wouldn't really matter. It could have been Tim Drake, who's a better Robin
Mhm.
canonically, and it would still be like that motherfucker. He really replaced me. All right,
Oh, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
thought
Like
that was a good moment. Um,
yeah, it's a really good
and it
moment.
must have been a
And
great moment for it to stand out from the rest of the moping he did. It felt distinct.
yes.
It
Yeah.
definitely felt distinct from the rest of the moping he was doing all season.
Yeah, because this is a point in time where I'm like, yeah, you become too much like Batman, your psyche and your narcissism yourself. Because the idea of him being like, I'm gonna hurt Batman by leaving him and making him feel alone, and immediately Batman's like, no, I'm gonna just
Yeah,
replace you immediately, and he's like, oh, my strategy didn't work, and I'm like, ha. That's why you need to be checked right now. This season is not good because of you and your bullshit and that you're dropping in as deep as Bruce is. Um and it's great to see that he goes through that growing journey, but the thing that's jarring to me about it is the season finale. You know what I mean? We'll talk more about that, but
yeah.
it's
I
just
couldn't. I'll be honest. I was checked out by the season finale, only
right.
because I knew it just wasn't real. So it's just like I don't care what they do in this.
Yeah, it's such a bummer to me because it's just like you do all
I
this, and
couldn't
then all
believe
of a
that was
sudden
how
the
they
season
chose to
finale.
end the season.
Yeah, it's I'm like that is the reason why I'm like I do hope this show gets better. I like what they're trying to establish, the complexity of the psyches and the tones and all that kind of stuff, but the way they chose to end this season, I'm like, wow, that is just that is just a U-turn out of nowhere, and it's wild to me.
What's good about season 2 and 3 to me, again, I haven't seen season 4 other than the
Mhm.
first episode, is they fully embrace the other characters that would be involved in this.
Right.
Like this season, yes, you see a dead Joker. You hear stuff about, hey, you know how Riddler doesn't use guns? Well, he used guns, but you get to see characters in
Mhm.
the coming seasons.
Good. They're not just like
And
people
it's
that
the
they're alluded
Arrowverse, which
to.
I didn't feel was afraid of showing characters
Yeah.
in general. Like I know I say Arrowverse because it's literally like if you look at the names, it's all the like same 5 names across all of
Oh yeah.
those things. I understand that they are in adjacent Earths, but it's still the Arrowverse to me.
Yeah.
This time period is still Arrowverse.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's basically how they did Supergirl. She's like, oh, she's on a different planet, and
I
well, the
mean,
teen
that
loves
one
me.
was
She's coming.
more down to she was on CBS first,
Yeah,
so
a hundred
they
percent.
couldn't use her
Yeah, that
until
was yeah that was a
CW
very
took it over again.
absolutely and yeah, you're right to point out Arrowverse because yeah, the writers and the producers and all that kind of stuff.
And
Um,
just in general, those
mhm.
even if it didn't look great, they were giving you like Harley Quinn, Suicide Squad, like all of those characters were like showing up. It's just this, yeah. So the seasons to come, they show you more characters, and I'm just like, yeah, I'm enjoying this. I still don't love Dick Grayson overall, but he gets better, and the show introduces more characters, so it's more people to enjoy, even if I don't love the lead.
But yeah, like I said, it's just, to me, and I'm not saying that I like it because it's fascinating to me. I'm like, oh, this is where he's going. This is what his fallout from Batman's actually is, and him finding his own way. Like the idea where it's like Corey being at one point like, how many Robins are coming back with you? And he goes like, none. I'm like, all right, that's a little over dramatic, but I see what you're doing here. Like that's good for you to know that you need to leave Robin behind. But I hate the point where he's like, once I put on that mask, I become a different person. I'm like, no, you're that same person without the mask, and that's the point. It's just like it's really taken over your entire personality.
It's not a Bruce Wayne Batman thing.
Yeah, because Bruce Wayne Batman was able to separate that, right? We don't see enough
in
of
an unhealthy way, yes.
In a very unhealthy way, absolutely. But able to separate that nonetheless. And because he used Bruce Wayne as the facade of like, this is my mask and this, like all that kind of stuff, and Batman's who I really actually am. In this, there's no separation. It's just Dick Grayson and Robin, for fundamental purposes, without the suit, are just fundamentally the same person. That's it.
I mean, I think you're right in that the show had a line, as you just mentioned, trying to make it seem as if he felt there was a difference between him in the mask and out of the mask. But what we see doesn't really show a difference. And
no,
I'm saying that in the stuff I've read that I like, again, I'm acknowledging that Robin isn't written the same way all the time. The stuff I've read that made him my second favorite was that in a healthy way, yes, he's more free to do things as Robin, but it felt more like a Spider-Man thing of like, yeah, maybe you were tamped down before, but this form of anonymity gives you a chance to truly explore who you are instead of it being two distinct people.
Absolutely. It's the way I see it. I'm like, no, he did, and his character's not there yet in his growth journey. But the idea of like, no, you're using the mask as an excuse. That's what you're doing. You're fundamentally the same asshole, like with or without the mask. That's the point, and that's why I like about the fact that at least he recognized that from his relationship with Batman. He's like, yeah, I got to split. This is not good for me. But he never actually does anything to address it other than just be a loner. And I'm like, this is crappy. Like you're not actually actively trying to address these issues. You're just getting away from Batman.
And yeah, I mean, Jeff Johns is a writer and director on this. I'm not a fan of him personally, but
right,
I must say that I've read things by him that I like, and he is what people usually ask for, well, people who are fans ask for, which is, don't just get some Hollywood person who doesn't care about comics to write these things. Why don't you get the people who are successfully writing the comics to come in and do that? And so yes, I think that also adds to my disappointment of like, oh, why are you doing this to him if you're from the comics? But they do things like, as you said, when you start the season, he is a cop. That is a run for a long time. Grayson, like he's an agent, but still, you will see him with a badge and a gun in the comics. So that's there, but yeah, I struggle with that. Otherwise, I think that the other characters on the team, well, even though the show isn't that committed to having them be a proper team, it seems like they're constantly like, I guess we met up here. Well, see you later, or let's have a sleepover, but then we're leaving each other again.
Yeah, it's like everything we're doing is out of practical. Yeah.
I think one character, especially on the rewatch, that I was like, wow, they really don't care about this character, is Beast Boy. And I was like,
yes,
one thing I like about the show is if you watch the title sequence, you'll know which characters will be in the show. And I'm like, wow, they really they put him at the end of the first episode. You don't see him again until like the third or fourth episode.
Yeah.
And he's just constantly on the outs. He's constantly like, oh, hey, like, what are you guys doing over there? Or, oh, is there another Rob? I'm like, well, let's give him something to do. I feel like everyone else has like a thing they're dealing with. they just rip him away from not the team, but the writers rip him away from Doom Patrol, and then it's just
Mhm.
like, yeah, he really likes turning into a tiger.
Yeah, he turns into a tiger and plays video games. I mean, like for all intents and purposes, I'm like, yeah, okay, that makes sense for the character, but it's not good for good writing. It's like him being so like a vegan and passive and all that kind of stuff. And no, I've never actually been anyone. For him to actually involve himself in the team matters is would be inconsistent to me. But I mean, like that is one of those things where it's like he needs to step outside of his comfort zone a little bit more, as opposed to being like, I'm with you, Raven, I'm with you, I'm with you, and all this kind of crap. It's just he needed a voice of his own, and I don't think they hit that in this. They were just like,
No.
all right, well, we need him because we don't have Cyborg or we don't have someone else to use.
It's
It's
interesting
disappointing.
because I wouldn't say he's the best actor, but of this cast,
Mhm.
he was the actor I was most familiar with because he'd already led a movie in Big Hero 6. I know
Right.
it's different if you're using it, but it just feels like if you've got the charisma to lead a Pixar movie or a Disney movie, like
Yep.
at that level, you would trust the actor to, take more of a. And it's hard because they probably should have just used Cyborg for Titans,
Mhm.
given that they wanted to do an overall dark tone. Because
Mhm.
again, from what I've seen of Beast Boy, just anytime you hear me make a declaration like this, just know it's just from my experience, and I'm aware there are
Mhm.
different ways to write these characters that have been done. But my experience with Beast Boy is he really does lend himself to the Teen Titans Go aspect of it all. Like
Yes.
that is where he shines. And so like you get this. I don't mean this as a like put down, but this Disney actor, I mean that in terms of the ability to take something like that on at a young age and be the lead of Big Hero 6.
Mhm.
You would think that you'd trust him with that charismatic stuff to keep going instead of just like, well, we'll sprinkle him here and there. Yeah, I do think that at the end you see that he has this issue of like, oh man, I broke my rule and drew blood on that person for Raven, and she's rejected me. But it
Mhm.
felt like it only lasted for a scene. It wasn't really something he had to deal with. Beyond
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
But I was like, this is interesting. All right, let's see where this goes, because I'd forgot from when I watched it when it originally came out in 2018. I was like, oh, okay, like this will be a thing, because I know that they are linked in the Teen Titans show, both versions of the show.
Yep.
It's sometimes an unrequited love. Sometimes she's like, okay, fine, whatever. But
Yep.
what you described of him being like, oh, I'll just do it because Raven's doing it is kind of his thing.
Yep.
It's just you get more time with him in those shows, so it doesn't feel like that's the only thing he does.
But it's just one of those things where I'm like, you can't be that passive and still be a part of this team. And of course, the whole first season is like have this whole will they won't they energy of admitting that they're actually a team. And when I say they, it's really just Dick Grayson accepting the
because
fact that
everyone
they
else
are.
is on board.
Yeah, everyone else is like, we're a team. And Corey's like multiple times like, what would you call that? What would you call that? And it's like, yeah, this is a woman that has lost her memory, and she's got it better put better together than he does.
Even when she's like, oh, I just heard a girl I love, I'm like, honestly, I don't feel like enough time is spent, but the way you two connected, I believe it. Like it feels like a short amount of time, but I'm also just like, you've done nothing but show that you're invested in this group of people. So yeah, I buy that.
Yeah. I mean, like, I like the reasons why they all come together. I like the fact that they're just like, all right, this is what we're doing. But you're right that there's a lot of discomfort in that reluctance of, yeah, let's function properly. Because even when they're having that training montage of like, let's see what we can do. Like, I hated when Dick was like, what's your power? It's like, I keep you alive.
Yeah.
And I'm like, God
like
damn
that
it.
reaction, I was just like, oh. There's just certain things that happen in the show. Again, I acknowledge that some of the complaints I have about the show could be applied to Doom Patrol in terms of the way it insists on being edgy.
Right,
but
yeah.
I just didn't know those characters, so it was new to me and more interesting to explore.
Yeah.
Versus this, but yeah, I agree with you that when he's doing the training montage, it was another instance where they decided to make himself distance himself from these characters. Usually, a training montage would lead to more cohesion.
Yeah, it would lead
Even
to
if it
like
was
a
like, oh, you
bonding
guys aren't
moment.
good, but I'll work with you. Don't worry, I'll get you there.
Yeah,
But to have him try to distance himself like that, I was like, yeah, I just do not like this aspect of how they've portrayed Dick Grayson.
I agree. I agree. I thought the things that were interesting were, of course, when he got to the bridge and was like close to killing the guy, or at least didn't save the guy and all that kind of stuff. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is actually interesting to me and all this. This shows me that how far he's gone and all those types of things. But when he goes to the whole thing is like, I gotta protect Raven, and he's learned so many lessons up until that point that he's still being like, no, I'm gonna be cool about it, coy about it, and protect myself. And I'm like, you just said like you have to work as a team and we have to figure each other out, and you're holding everyone else at a distance. And it's like, why are you being such a hypocrite right now? This sucks. This
Mm-hmm.
sucks. It's
Yep.
terrible. And like, what do they get out of? What does he get out of protecting the fact that he's Robin, right? Aside from Garth being kind of annoying afterwards, like, do we get to meet Batman now? And it's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not what your initial thought was. You didn't say that. You just think you're above everyone else,
Yeah.
and that sucks.
Yeah. It's just not where I'll stop saying it. It's just not how I want to see him portrayed, especially if you're doing Titans. It just feels
Yep.
like it's too many things converging to be like, this would be the most optimistic this group of people, this group of writers would want to have
Mhm.
Dick Grayson. Uh,
Yeah.
Even if they wanted to make him darker the way they made these other characters darker on that
Mhm.
scale, you
Mhm.
would still have him at least meet their level of optimism.
Yeah, or like like gradually get better throughout the season. Like there are
And
times
they're
where he's
trying to
like,
show it through the like flashbacks of anytime he's with Donna and he's like, oh, I'm moping, I'm blah blah blah.
right.
And I was like, even this, like, why would he be such a bummer at this young age? I understand you say you
Mhm.
can say it's because his parents died, but that is the distinction between him and Batman. It's the point of the character, actually, is the
Mhm.
counterbalance of they both had their parents killed in front of them. One
Mhm.
of them was able to be like, all right, so what do we do about it? And the other one was just like, and now I'm gonna burn this world to the earth, or
Yeah.
the earth to the ground. Like it, it is the yin yang that. So if you're making it like, well, you're just gonna watch Dick Grayson be young Bruce Wayne and mopey, that's a bummer. But at
It's a
least
huge
by the
bummer.
time he meets up with Donna in a later episode,
Mhm.
he's smiling. They have a bit of banter, and you're like, okay, like this is someone he has a history with. I'm assuming a non-sexual one, like Dove, but a history. They grew up together. You can see how he has changed and matured, but it's not really from stuff that happened during the show. It's just like you're like, well, I
Mm.
guess yeah, he grew up over from this time.
Yeah, and then it's just like, cool, you're gonna show us a flashback of young Robin that is being mopey and all that kind of stuff, and how Donna had to basically console him and all that crap.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's it makes sense for what they're writing here because
Yes, I'm
Bruce
not saying it doesn't
never,
make sense. It's
yeah,
just
it's just
an
a bummer to watch.
unfortunate use of a character that I would say
Mhm.
overall, even you would say he's a more optimistic and cheery
Oh,
character. And I'm not
absolutely.
saying he needs to be as cheery as you've seen him in the past,
Mhm.
or as I'm not optimistic as I've seen him in the past.
Mhm.
But to just make him Bruce Wayne Jr. is a bummer. And
It's a
now I
huge bummer.
understand when people, I don't actually, but I get when people complain about Tom Holland Spider Man and they're like, he's just Iron Man Jr. I don't agree that that's the case, but
Mhm.
I'm hearing myself sound like them as I'm like, he's just Batman Jr. That's not how I want to see it.
Right, right. And yeah, when they're complaining about that, I'm like, I get what they're saying, but I feel like they're making a lot of jumps in the
Mm-hmm.
future in order to
I feel
get
like it's
there,
just
right?
clearly distinct
Yeah,
from
it's
Iron
just
Man.
like, sure, like you can both establish the fact that Tony Stark and Peter Parker like were both born of like heavily insecure people and all that kind of stuff, and Tony Stark got to that point, but that's the point of Peter, is like he just contains that aspect of it to the mask versus Tony is is Iron
I mean,
Man
yeah,
and Tony at the
he
same
doesn't have
time.
an alter ego.
He doesn't.
Yeah,
Versus Peter does, right?
yeah,
Like he takes off the mask and he's like, "Oh yeah, you gotta do school stuff and whatever." And then when he puts on the mask, he's all whatever. And that's very much the idea of like what we're talking about here with Batman and Robin is that Robin has just yeah, you don't have a differentiation between your alter ego. You just are this mopey narcissistic guy that's always making everything about him and distancing yourself and isolating yourself. It
and he's doing
sucks.
that in that flashback with Donna too, like making
Yes,
it
he
like,
is.
oh, this is a bummer because she's like, but you went with Batman, right? He's like, yeah, but why I didn't do anything. I'm like, oh my god, like she's
Yeah.
clearly sitting here not doing stuff with Wonder Woman.
Yeah. Exactly. Like she's actually just like watching Netflix or
Yeah,
something like that, and he's just like, "Oh yeah, he didn't let me do anything." I'm like, "What? You're a kid. Like, what did you do? You scouted. You did your part of the mission.
that
Like,
I feel like that's even part of the tragedy of
mhm,
young Robin is that his stance is this is so fun, and then he comes to the realization of like, what the fuck was I like? Why did he do this to me?
yeah,
That comes with age. But if he's already at the young age being like, this sucks, I'm like, wow, I don't know where
yeah."
you have to grow with him.
It is brutal. And of course, I'm not asking anyone who had their parents murdered in front of them to be cheery or happy.
Hmm.
I think that's completely unrealistic. But the point of him is that he would be able to find fun because there's that one episode where he goes like to Atlas, the strong man, where he's like, I wonder how things would have been if I was, grew up with you and all that kind of stuff. I'm like, would you have been fun? Like, I don't know.
I
Like,
mean, this comes from me reading the Nightwing comics. I
right.
like that in that time period, it's after he's angry at Batman, but still not really talking to him, that he
Yep.
does gravitate to going to Haley's circus and like hanging out
Mhm.
with them, and even I think tries to like buy it at one point so he can keep it safe.
Mhm.
And so I do like the hint. I mean, they only did it for one episode, but the idea that he's starting to be like, I guess it's not even like out of interest. It's more like, oh, I got to track down this lead or whatever. But
Mhm.
in the comics, it was nice to see him go back and you see like, oh, this is what it's like with a real family. Like these people who know me
Yeah.
and like support me.
Yep.
But yeah, this show was just like, nah.
We're not doing
We're
that.
just gonna linger on this for like this scene, and that's that.
Yeah. And we're gonna push it all on Atlas to be like, oh, I'm proud of you. I'm just and showing actual respectful and good, healthy love and support towards
Hmm.
Dick. And all this kind of stuff. Like for him to just go, like, I wonder. And I'm like, you should wonder a little bit harder. Like you should definitely look at this dynamic a little bit harder. And I like
Yeah,
the fact that he's
this
like, I'm sorry that we lost out of touch. Is like, hey, that's both on both of us. I'm like, yeah, good for you for owning that. But at
yeah.
the same time, mm, exchanging a phone number ain't it.
But this is the thing, right? Like it's to me, as you said, if your parents just died, it's not that like, hey, just you know, keep a stiff upper lip on that one, buddy.
Yeah.
Get over it. It's more that his personality is one that is still searching for ways to connect
Yes.
and finding that. And I know I just said in the comics he's doing it after, like as more of an adult, but
Mhm.
it's still the idea that like, well, I had family with the Bat
Mhm.
family, not just Batman, but Alfred,
Mhm.
Barbara, eventually Tim
Mhm.
and stuff. But that he would still be like, well, I mean, I had a family before I had Bruce Wayne, and that
Mhm.
he would reach out there as well and keep that as part of his life.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I guess they didn't use Bloodhaven in this; they used Detroit. But that, yeah, he would be like, and I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm going to remove myself from Gotham
Mhm.
and try to figure this out, but not in a loner way. In a way of like, I can create a new network here.
Yeah, yeah, and that's what I was really hoping that this series would be more about. Like, I'm like, okay, the first few episodes, I get it. This is how far but he stays consistent like that throughout the whole season. That's what
Hmm.
really bums me out is the idea of like, okay, if we do take this analogy as like, okay, good job, Robin, you've broken up with a narcissist. Now what are you gonna do? You're gonna move somewhere else. You're gonna recreate your own life. No, he does not do any of those things. He does not establish network with the people that he had loved before and cared about clearly. He's just like he barely he seems phased when he sees all his like circus people like burned
Hmm.
alive and all that kind of stuff. And he's just like, oh, I used to know these people. And I'm like, that's it. You're not gonna
Hmm.
have a scene where you're crying or like some toxic masculine bullshit where you get drunk at a bar and start a fight. Like,
Like
no.
do the Hank thing, like do
Yeah,
the Hank and Don thing where
exactly.
they they're having a fight in the library, and
Hmm.
then I mean it was quite the overreact. Like the way they escalated that was pretty ridiculous. But it is what you're
Yeah.
talking about, that like the fight between the two of them and that like impasse they came to just spilled out into like, well, now everyone's catching hands
Yep.
because you tried to interrupt what was
Absolutely.
happening here.
Hmm.
But it wasn't just like completely shutting down. It
Yep.
was like, well, this energy has to go somewhere, and now we're gonna have a full-on fight as if you guys are all henchmen and know how to fight too, instead of what
Hmm.
a normal university fight would be, which is like
Yeah.
a lot of tussling and like going to the ground.
Yeah. A lot of fisticuffs for sure
Yeah, it was
there.
just like, wow, so everyone knows how to fight here. Like this is so weird.
Hey, it's that's television for you, baby. It's really
It
good.
was only in my head because I was watching this video on bad scenes, and
Mhm.
one of them was like the unrealistic escalation of just,
Yeah.
and it was like this was like a textbook example of it in an episode I like with characters I like.
Mhm.
It was just like, oh, like they really just were like, no, we're just doing a fight scene now. Like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter that this is not the place for this, or really how this would go. It's
Mhm.
just happening.
Yeah. I mean, everything about that scene was logical until everyone's like, oh, everyone at this library is a
People are
good
doing like
fighter.
roundhouse kicks and like, so I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. That does not make sense. They should have just
the
pummeled
initial
everyone
punch made
around
sense.
them. Yeah.
The initial punch made sense in terms of just like, he's angry, you're gonna
Yep.
get hit. But then it became like people just breaking out actual like martial arts, and I was like, no,
Yeah.
this is
And it
too
also
much.
bothered me because I'm like, hey, the guy that was concerned about Hawk, why are you doing this right now? You should recognize and just pull Hawk aside and subdue him, right? Like before he hurts other people more because he's already hurt
Yeah,
himself through
I
that.
I agree with you. I think in the writers' room they probably had the conversation of like, well, he had just said I don't want to see you get hurt again, so now he's gonna protect his brother, and also,
Right.
hey, no one can do that to my brother but me. A
Yeah.
bunch of things in there. I agree with you. It doesn't make sense that it's happening.
Mhm.
I can see how people could trick themselves into thinking that was the right
Mhm.
way to execute that scene.
Yep. Yeah. In which case I'm like, this is not consistent with what he was doing earlier, trying to protect him because of the concussions and the CTE and all that kind of stuff during the
I do
football.
think it still played into him wanting to be able to do stuff with him, which
Yeah.
you see constantly throughout the episode. It's just that's not the
Yes.
venue to do it. But
Oh, yeah.
I think they were like, look, we can economy of writing. We can just get it all in here. Like this is the time he can finally do something with Hank. He doesn't have to
Yeah.
sit on the sidelines.
Yeah. I mean, just for God's sake, I wish it didn't happen at a library of
Yeah,
all places, right? I
like
was just like, if this was at a bar, I
mhm.
can accept that to a degree. You know, it could be close quarters. It doesn't have to be choreographed so well with so much space, but it's the idea of like at a bar, people will be able to have beer bottles and other weapons at
Mhm.
your disposal. What are you gonna do? Throw a third edition like book at like Hawk and be like, that's what I would imagine these nerds doing at the library. It's just like, no, what is happening here? You're just bullying people at this point.
Yeah,
That administrator had every reason to be like, yeah, we're gonna kick you out.
that was another thing. Again, I like this episode. I'm still gonna tell you.
Yeah.
Didn't it make sense that Hank's reaction, even though he just said like I can't afford to be kicked out of school, his reaction was like, "Good, yeah, kick us out." Like the look he gave was
Yeah.
like, "You literally just said this is not ideal," and
Yeah.
your brother has been like, "Go ahead, kick us out." I'm like, "Nah, not the play for you, Hank. I don't think this is gonna work out for you."
But and this is me knowing too much about psychology now, is the idea of like, okay, that pre-rejection. Cool. I don't need you like you can't fire me, I quit kind of bullshit. I'm like, that makes
For the
sense
brother, yeah,
for
but
the
that wasn't
brother.
what was happening with Hank.
Exactly. And that's where it's like heavily inconsistent because that's where I would have been like, Hank, you're gonna stop him from talking all this shit right now, right? It's just like
I don't even need him to
neither one
stop.
of
It was
you.
just more like so he's not gonna get mad at him after he like endangered his ability to stay in school.
Yeah. It's just
They
like
kind of just says it after the fact, like, "Oh man, we're kicked out of school. That's a bummer." I'm like, it seemed like it was avoidable.
yeah, it's like
It seemed
if
like
there's
that woman was
anything you could have
actively
done.
like, "Please give me a reason to keep you here. I'm like anything, please.
Yeah, and for him to be
You're
like,
a
he
good student
hasn't
and
he
you're
done
our star.
enough? Yeah,
I
it's like,
need
hasn't
I
he
need
done
both of you."
enough? All this kind of crap of like he's giving his body, he's giving his health. I'm like, you can't put that out there when that's what he wants to do. He clearly loves football in that scenario, and he's really good at it. It's just the idea of like he also doesn't take care of his health, and he lives for football and doesn't want to stop. Like I get it. I get everything that's happening there. I just don't think the execution was right between the two people that they had in the scene. I
No,
just think the roles were reversed. And like, you need to make more sense of this because they this doesn't make sense.
no, it didn't make sense. And again,
Right.
it's in an episode I really like.
Yeah. That episode went dark.
Yeah,
Like that's the one thing about this series that I'm like, holy crap! They went to all the degrees of like they're really showing you how dark this is. Their tone and all that kind of stuff, and
and
through the
I like
themes
that
and the
Dove
visuals. Yeah.
2.0 at the end when he's like, "You gotta leave," and she's like, "No," and she closes the door. I'm like, "Look, I understand that in real life this is bad and they should be away from each other, but
Yes.
I'm happy for him for the purposes of this show that is living in this edgy world that like he has found someone, and they've made it clear like at that point this isn't going to be a relationship that lasts. She's gonna
Hmm.
be with Dick Grayson at some point and then come back to him. But so it feels like this is more like I see you, you're my person in a more meaningful way than just let's have sex.
Yeah. We've
And
trauma
because
bonded.
I guess I liked it because it was a payoff to showing what that Dove's point was, which was I hate that it was just a freak accident. There's no one to blame. There's no one for me to punch to make this right.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, "Excuse me, I can beat up this coach. I'm in. This I found
Yeah.
my purpose,
Yeah.
and it's
Like,
with
I
someone
will.
I like." And again, I mean that in a more meaningful way than just someone I'm attracted to sexually.
Yeah. I mean, it's clear that they both trauma bonded in that situation. They're just like, it's a like you said, the show goes to good lengths to be like, this is not something that's stay sustainable. It
Mm-hmm.
is a toxic relationship that they've built. But for crime fighting purposes, it worked. It worked
Mm-hmm.
for a while. I like the fact that it goes to show you all those things. But what I don't like is, oh, they're gonna pivot hard to Dick being the end game in this. But again, and that's why I didn't like the way the season ended because I'm just like, this
Oh,
is just out of
to be,
nowhere.
I think again, you probably have better insights because you paid
Mm.
attention to the episode. My memory is it's all just being put into his head to keep him
Yes.
docile while they're doing something. So he's not Endgame.
No,
I've seen the other seasons.
absolutely.
He's not. That was just to placate Dick that he would end up with her.
Oh yeah. It's just playing into that fantasy of like, what would I need to make my life actually okay? And that's
Yeah,
why it's
so
so
that's what I'm saying. It's not the
jarring.
show
It's
saying that
so
they're Endgame.
yes. But it's just for a long time. And this is what I hate about that episode. It's just like I remember what the first time I watched this season, being like, what the hell did I miss?
Mm-hmm. It's
It's
very jarring.
it's not a good feeling. Like they did that with Buffy when like Dawn was introduced. I'm like, what the hell did I miss? Like, was
Hmm.
there this character here that I just did not know about the entire time of all the watch throughs I've been through? And no, it's just like, okay, at the end, like at least with this series and this season, they were kind enough to be like, oh yeah, there's someone fucking around with Dick's mind at the end
Mm-hmm.
of it, and didn't leave that cliffhanger to the next season. But then even then, you're just like, this is some weird pacing. This is some weird whatever. And
I think it's a terrible season finale.
yeah,
It's
it's
so
terrible.
bad.
And there are parts of it where you're just like, okay, there's like this time around watching, I'm less angry because I know what's happening. But there are elements of like, yeah, that is something that, your brain being influenced would look like. There's this part where like this person just appears out of
Mm-hmm.
nowhere with this like visual. You're like, okay, yeah, that's a good kind of indicator, but still it's not enough.
I
it's,
just think
it's
it's a waste.
not good.
Like what? Why? Yeah, I just don't feel like it makes sense as a last episode of the season. It
No,
just feels like you're upending any momentum you had to
yeah,
be like, hey, look, for 80% of this episode, you're gonna, or probably 95% of it. I don't know why I said
Mhm.
for 95% of the episode, we want you to think this is really happening. We want you to
Yeah.
think this is a jump forward. And so if it's a jump forward, then why wouldn't I just be like, well, I want to see what happened before this jump forward. And then
Yeah.
when you are like, nah, it's happening to him, like someone put this in his head, you're like,
Mhm.
okay, so then that means we're going into Act 3, right? Not like
Nope.
no,
Nope.
we're done. Okay,
Wait for next
bye.
season, baby. It was one of the things where I'm like, this is so unusual because it felt to me like the writers were being like, yes, we understand we went probably a bit too dark on every single character. So this is what next season's going to look like. Oh no, that was also a tease.
Hmm.
Like the idea of like Robin's being a little bit more positive. Everyone's going to have like a different future and all that kind of stuff. Nope, pure tease all around. So it's just like, well, what are we doing here? Are we still doing this negative um Bruce Wayne Jr. kind of angle on Batman for Robin the next season too? Or are we trying to get happier interior? What is happening here? It's so jarring and I don't like it. It's the one of the worst season finales I've seen
Yeah, I did not like it.
for a show that I fundamentally like so much.
It's
It's
also
so
funny
weird.
that it was like they couldn't help themselves and they made
Mhm.
Dick jealous that Hank went over to paint stuff. I'm like, you're not there. And
Yeah.
if this jump forward, if I'm supposed to believe it's a jump forward, you
Mhm.
know that they have a relationship beyond sex. Like it's not like
Yeah.
they still are connected and friends.
Yeah. Yeah. And I
And you
did.
guys were on a team together. So like,
Yeah.
what
And
do you think's
one thing
gonna?
I did like about that was Dove's kind of response to him is like, "Whoa, whoa, hold on, I'm 9 months pregnant here, buddy." He offered to help,
So I
and
took
I
it.
we needed to get this help done. It's like you don't get to be mad at this. I'm glad that she pushed back on that because yeah, you, you don't get to do that right now.
Yeah, I just was like, this is such a bummer to have
Yeah,
Dick
it
Grayson
is.
be like this. Like,
Yeah, I
oh
mean, I
man,
get what they're going for. He's clearly unevolved. He's fresh out of the
I just
shadow
mean
of Batman, all that kind of stuff.
even
It's
in the version that happens in his head, he's still an idiot. Like it's not
yeah,
it's not
it's
like he was noticeably not an idiot. It's just
yeah.
like
He's
you're
just
just like, oh okay, yeah, this is really him, the jealous
yeah.
guy.
It's just a little bit less aggro, but he's still a dumbass. He's still unevolved and still like you. You just left the relationship. You didn't do anything to actually fix yourself and heal after that. That's the problem here, bud. And like, I hope that in season two they do things that he's actively reaching out to the team a little bit more. He's caring a little bit more. Obviously, I've seen a little bit of season two. I can't remember it for the life of me, but it's just one of those things where your criticism of this being not Robin or Dick Grayson, I'm like, yeah, it's not. I hope the show finds its footing eventually. I'm surprised it didn't in the first season because that to me was like for two episodes of this Bruce Wayne Jr. Sure, the whole season. Wow,
Hmm.
that was rough. 100% that was rough.
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked what they were doing with it. I liked the darker tone. I liked all that kind of stuff. But you're right, they mischaracterized Robin and they did what I think is a DC TV series issue of like we need clearly one character to be a Batman surrogate because that's what
Yeah.
we know you people like. And I'm just like,
And it was like
yeah,
that clearly should have been Hawk.
yes, it
But
clearly should have been Hawk.
well, whatever. We've spent this whole time not really talking about Raven or Sun or Starfire, so I feel
Yeah,
like we should get into them
yeah,
as they are half of the main team in the
yeah.
current iteration.
Mhm,
I like what they did with Starfire, but maybe that's because I know where they're going,
mhm.
and so I fully appreciate once they fully drop the mystery of it all and
Yeah.
incorporate people from her home planet.
Mhm,
I like all of that, but I found her to be, as you said, like the first couple of episodes that you're with her, I found like, oh, like this is a cool idea that she just thinks like, oh, I'm a spy. That's like kind of
mhm.
what's his name, Jason Bourne type
Yeah.
thing. I'm always down for those types of stories, so I liked it, and
Mhm,
I thought they did a good job of like getting at some of the imagery of Starfire when she uses her powers, even though she
Mhm.
doesn't walk around looking like Starfire. By the way she's lit and when her eyes go green, I'm like, yeah, there's Starfire. I
Mhm.
see what the vision they had for this character was.
Mhm.
But yeah, I like that. Ultimately, she learns like, holy shit, my whole point of being here is to kill the person that I formed the greatest bond with.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
gotta sort some shit out.
It's cool stuff. And I mean, like with Starfire's character, I'm like, am I going to agree with the people about her design not being the best? Sure. Do I care that much about it? No, I really don't. Because it's like that's what I mean. Like I was able to like the show a little bit more because I didn't have that base background of like, yeah, why isn't her skin orange? I'm like, what? Why does it matter? It's orange when it matters. Like
Hmm.
that's what's important to me, right? Um, the whole characterization of the character, I really really like her, especially with how much
Me
of a
too.
Dick is in the sense where it's just like, okay, they just had sex and he's talking about going off and being alone again. And I'm like,
I was
for
so
her,
angry in that moment. I was like,
oh, so
you
angry.
gotta relax, guy.
Yeah, but she played it off so good. I'm like,
Hmm.
okay, that's what this guy's. Yep, he's not ever going to commit to me, so I'm never going to make that mistake ever again.
Yeah.
And I'm like, good for you, good for you. It's just, it, I like. There's so much about her character that was really, really great to me.
Yeah. I mean, I really like the actress, but
Mhm.
I thought the character as executed, whether that be the marriage of the writing and the actor, really worked for me.
Mhm.
Uh,
Raven though,
she's kind of the point of the series. The only
yeah,
reason all four of them are together is because of her.
yes,
She knew she had to find Dick because she had a vision of his parents dying.
Mhm.
Obviously, Beast Boy and Starfire save her at certain points, or at least
Mhm.
engage with her and like her enough to want to stick around.
Mhm.
So yeah, that's how they become this show's version of a team.
Yeah.
Uh,
What
but
I
yeah,
didn't like about her character was how quickly for she forgot about her mother and what not her birth mother,
the
but like
woman who
her
raised her.
yeah,
Yeah.
the surrogate mother that raised her, Melanie, I think is what they call her and all that kind of stuff. But like, oh, you got over that real quick. That sucks. It's like you
Yeah, I think
it
I
really,
would
really
say
was bad.
they had too many things going on with her. So
Yep.
there's the idea that she sees herself as Rachel, but Raven is this other entity that's threatening to come out of her at all points, which feels like
Mhm.
it's enough given how little they put into other characters in this show.
Yep.
But then they're also like, also this cult is trying to bring her dad back. Also, the woman she thought was her mom's not her mom, but she loved her, but she's got her
Mhm.
other mom, which feels like that should have been the focus the whole time, is like
Yep.
getting to know your actual mother and like what's going on there. But she comes later in the season
Mhm.
and you're like, is she good? But then she does some things where you're like, ah, yeah, I guess she is good. Oh no, wait, she's doing some weird stuff.
Yeah, and that was such a big red flag to me. Is like the mom is like, you're doing a lot of socially adjusted things right now that are very self-aware that you should not have those skills, especially being institutionalized, tortured the way you've been for the past however many long years, and thinking that your daughter, your birth daughter, is dead. You know what I mean? It's just like all those things is like this. This is heavily inconsistent of your behavior right now. You should be a little bit more erratic. And
And then
you
she
know,
showed her true colors.
and then and then she gets her true colors. It's just like the entire time, like, I don't trust you, and I think everyone else is a fool to trust you here too. It's like, let's go to my house in Ohio or something
Yeah.
like that,
I
where I
was
still
like, why is
have,
everyone so okay to just go here?
yeah,
But also because I knew kind of how season two played out, specifically the
Mhm.
premiere. I was kind of like, none of this matters to me. This,
Yeah.
that's the unfortunate part of the revisit
Mhm.
is I'm just like, none of this will matter. Almost
Mhm.
like minutes into the second season.
Yeah, yeah. But
Um,
you're right. There's too much going on with her, and we don't actually get anything significant with Raven.
I think she
Um,
has moments where I'm like, oh, I would be interested in this version of the character, but because
mhm.
there's so many things going on, and we've talked about this, like it's a first season, so maybe they don't know specifically where they want to land on
Mhm.
her. I think their idea was she's not gonna be complete dark. Uh,
Right,
she'll probably be more optimistic than people are used to, based
right.
on Teen Titans and Teen Titans Go. But
Mhm.
uh, yeah, I just feel like she had three separate things that could have been a season arc on their
Yeah.
own and didn't need competing things going on.
I completely agree. She could have very well just been like, "Hey, don't have the surrogate mother involved in this. Just leave her at the church, leave her with all that kind of stuff. You didn't need that because she could have just killed the sister like that was responsible. Like, oh, we have to all make sacrifices. The one that was, I don't know if you would say evil or whatever, but carrying out her agenda. You could have just had her, and that would have been fine.
Mm-hmm.
Like we would have gotten it. It's just like you didn't need like a surrogate mother's death in order to justify her emo-ness. It's just like no, you're just a kid that's very well aware that you're a foster kid and like being raised in the church, and that you're this dark, but everyone around you is all about like God and Jesus and all that kind of stuff. That would have been enough. And then to be like, now we found your birth mother would have made sense for her to latch onto.
Mm-hmm.
But the idea that she's got that much going on, and then for that revelation toward the end where Starfire just knows everything because of the starship and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, all right, this is just some wild jumping that we're taking now. It's
I
her
did like
character is very inconsistently paced.
so I guess we should explain for people who haven't watched
Mm-hmm.
the issue kind of at the heart of this, even though they take their time to get to it, is uh Raven has this way of looking into people's minds and seeing. So that's how she knows Dick is lying when he says I'll come back. It's how she knows how to properly deal with Dove when she meets her, when she's like, oh, I see how you have a relationship with Dick, and this is what you're thinking of when I meet you. Okay, got it. But she says, oh, I've never been able to read Corey, who is Starfire. But when they finally do the mind link or whatever it's called, I know that's not what it's called, but that's what they're doing. Basically, Starfire goes into kill mode. And I like that her reaction was like, I must have done something wrong. Like, that's not her. Yes, I could feel she wanted to kill me, but I could also feel she didn't want to kill me. And the mom's like, nah, don't trust that part of it. Just the part where she wants to kill you. And she's like, no, I really do think something, like, I must have just done it wrong. Like, that's not her. I know her. I like that she wasn't just, obviously in the moment she's scared. I'm not saying that her immediate reaction is like, oh, it's okay, don't worry. She is legitimately scared from that and wants to distance herself. But when she reflects on it, I like that she had enough of an experience with her to be like, I know she's not actually going to try and kill, or doesn't actually want to kill me. I like that they at least left the relationship that way, where she had enough of an experience with her to be like, I know her better than that. But that's kind of all I liked from her. And not because I think the actress was doing anything wrong. It's more she had to play so many different things that I don't think melded well together. Yeah. It was hard to get like a consistent beat on her like the other three, even if it's Beast Boy, who doesn't really get a lot to do. You're kind of like, well, I get his thing. I know what he's about.
Yeah, like Beast Boy is consistent. Everyone else is consistent. Her thing is just pulled all over the place, and I'm just, I really heavily agree with you. She's got just too much going on in her background and all that kind of stuff. She didn't need that much. Again, just cut the surrogate mother out of the whole situation. Just be like, your mom gave you up to foster care, and you were raised by a church. Like that's all she needed.
Well, yeah, just because she's already doing things like saying prayers to keep Raven in and stuff like that. You already understand why she would be darker than a normal kid her age. She's dealing with a lot. What was it called? The organization, that group that just like created nuclear families to go fight. I was like, I like these guys. I guess it's why I was like, I don't know why we shifted hard at the end here away from them.
I agree. That was a cool kind of setup, is the idea of like that whole family being like, oh, we're going on a mission. We're going to take these stims. We're going to do all this kind of stuff. And we're going to be super creepy about it. That was so cool to me. I love that. I don't know why they turned away from that.
It was a good kind of dark mirror image of like the family that should be trying to be created by Dick, but he's against it. And then you're like, well, and look at these weirdos over here.
Yeah, and I like the idea of like when they're their Suicide Squad bombs started going
Yeah.
off in the
Time to
head.
take a nap,
It's
kids.
time to take a nap, kids. I'm like, this is such a badass way to exit. It's just like, it's really good. And for Dick to be like, I've seen this before. They're mind control. Like, I'm like, are you sure you've seen this before? Because it seems like you don't know what you're doing right now.
I got the sense that what they wrote for him didn't match
Yeah.
how he was directed. Like,
Mhm.
it's you don't seem like you know what you're doing. In
Yeah.
fact, you really lost when you tried to go up against them, and it was only because Jason Todd saved you that
Yeah.
you aren't dead right now.
Yeah, and it wasn't like, it doesn't look like he doesn't know what he's doing because the only thing he knew how to do was Batman stuff, and he was trying to avoid that internal conflict. He just didn't know what
Yeah,
he
he didn't know
just
what he
looked
was
like he
getting
didn't know what
into.
he was doing at
Yeah.
all. I'm just like, oh. So you've underestimated the situation, which is not something Batman would actually teach you to do.
It would be a Robin thing to do, but they weren't playing him
Yes.
like Robin.
Exactly. It's just like this is very inconsistent. If you're gonna make him Batman Jr., make him more prepared, make him more whatever, and make him what, which is something that would be like, yeah, I don't like this at all. But there's not enough conflict with what Robin is known as traditionally and what we see here. It's just like you're very much in denial about this,
Yeah.
and
I'm also
that
really
is,
looking forward to him getting his Nightwing suit because I was like, I
yeah,
do not like this Robin suit.
yeah.
This, for some reason, just the way it's even shot, just like it feels like they don't think it's cool. It feels
Well,
like they think it's kind of goofy.
yeah.
Whereas the
I,
Nightwing suit he gets, I'm like, yeah, here we go.
yeah, I can't wait till they get that suit. But and that's why I'm like, yeah, I get why we're kind of clowning on the suit right now of like how it looks and all that kind of stuff. But even Jason Todd be like, oh, it's got these upgrades, it's got these upgrades and all this kind of stuff. I'm like, yeah, all right. So we know he's getting rid of it. So like you saying that kind of stuff doesn't matter. But it's
When he
just
says that, you don't know he's gonna get rid of it, though.
right, right. But it like his whole thing is like, let's leave this behind, and
That
anyone
is
that
all in
knows
the
Dick
wake of
Grayson,
you thinking, "Wow, I'm jealous that he has another Robin," and could
he's
conceivably believe that he would double down on the Robinness just to make sure he stuck his
yeah.
could stake his claim on it.
Yeah, and all the other things that the Jason Todd is doing in the equation is like Batman let you do this on your own. It's the idea of like, wait, he's not micromanaging you. He's not doing
Mhm.
this. All those kind of things are really, really effective in regards to like an emotional abuse.
Like,
Like
yeah, like
I'm
in
gonna
a
fuck with you
drama
standpoint.
movie, it would be like, "Hey, how come you can be the good dad for this kid? Like, why
Yeah,
couldn't you be that dad for me?"
yeah. It's unfortunately a very real thing that a lot
Hmm.
of friends that we know right now are just like, my parents were not like this when I was a kid. They and with their kid, like the grandparent kind of stuff, like they're loving now, they're kind, they're all this kind of stuff. They were not
Oh
like
no,
that
I
when they're,
mean when you
yeah.
like find out that you have your parent has another family somewhere else, or like I'm talking about that trope.
Oh, I
Like
see, I see.
and I don't mean like, oh, secretly. I mean like the trope of like, hey,
Mhm.
you weren't a good father to me, but then you see them later in life with a new family, and I don't mean that in
Mm,
like it was a secret family, but you're just like, oh, like so you can do it, you just didn't do it for me, and that's
yeah,
not necessarily the fair response. But I thought that's what they were doing with Dick, of like, oh, so
right,
you can be good, you just weren't for me.
right. Yeah, and it was effective to that degree, but I'm like, is that what you wanted though? Is that you just wanted shinier toys? Because that's what it,
No, I
and a
think he
little bit of
wanted the
freedom.
trust, which is what I was saying. Like a lot of that
Yes.
gets lost in how they've portrayed him here, but
Oh,
that would
absolutely.
be what Dick Grayson would have wanted out of that.
Mhm.
Obviously, he needs a father figure, but
Right.
if you remove that, which you really shouldn't, but if you remove that, it would still be, if we're doing this as partners, I need you to actually treat me like a partner instead of a soldier.
Yeah, because Jason Todd leans way too into the soldier like thing. He's like, that's the point of Robin. We're there to draw the fire so he could
Yeah.
do his. And I'm like, when you say that, I'm like, what the hell? That just
Well, I mean, it's also what I don't like about the show is that I get that there's like, and I brought it up when we were talking about the Flash as well. Like, there's jokes about Batman, but if you're engaging in Batman content, like why give credence to those jokes
yeah,
about him? Like, take it seriously or pick another character.
I agree.
I think yes, there is a way to dismiss Batman as, I think, a complicated character, as
Mhm.
oh yeah, well he has that boy there to draw fire, or he's just a jerk that does it. But it's like, well, it's more complicated than that, and
Mhm.
you're seeing someone who's stunted in his efforts to connect, and he's
Yeah.
doing the wrong things, but the desire there isn't to alienate these kids or alienate other people.
Yeah.
It's just interesting to watch how he fumbles that, as
Yeah,
opposed to thinking that that's his goal.
yeah, he just doesn't know how to do it, but he fundamentally,
Yeah.
like, that's the one thing. Is just like, you're a loner, but are you? Like, you
Yeah,
really
like
want a bat
that. Well,
family
that's the
around you.
thing. He's not a
Yeah,
loner.
he's not.
He's not. But yeah,
It's
this
just
show
like
isn't about
all
Batman,
Trump.
but it's just
Yeah,
part of all the other stuff I don't like. Where I'm like,
yeah,
well, yeah, like you can't be so obviously against Batman while using his
MO.
his
Yeah,
universe.
yeah. You're doing everything that he's doing right now, and that's the whole, like, you
Well, I
don't.
mean, the writers. It
Right,
feels like they're against Batman. Like they don't like Batman.
right. And I'm just like, yeah, that doesn't track based on this. It just tracks like you wish you had Batman to work with.
Yeah, I mean that show. At that time, yeah, you're not allowed to have Batman on
Of
screen
course.
in any meaningful way. Obviously, you see the back of him
Yep.
in the finale, but they would have known that going into it. That was kind of by the time they were going.
Hmm.
I think that's like 3 or 4 years into the Arrowverse.
Right.
It had already been established like you guys are not ever going to have a Batman on
Hmm.
screen in any meaningful way. So
Yep.
they would know that, and again, we know it's the same team,
Mhm.
so it's just weird.
Yeah, and I do feel like it works better that way if we have Batman on screen that much. It's just like, okay, we are cheering about the thing that these people are actively working against and all that kind of stuff because we all like Batman. Um, because you're right, he's a fundamentally complex character from a psyche standpoint. He's like, he wants these things, he just doesn't know how to do them,
Mhm.
and this is the best way he knows how because he's been at a distance his whole life as the
Yeah, like
rich kid, you know?
he pours himself into the stuff he knows he can accomplish,
Yep.
like the crime fighting aspect, but
Mhm.
that doesn't mean that's all he wants. And we like when we talked
Mhm.
about Mask of the Phantasm, you see like how much he wants to just have love, and in
Yes,
that one it was romantic love, but he
Mhm.
wants love, and
of course.
I like that about him, and that's how he pours himself into it, and then fumbles it when it
Mhm.
comes to just the interpersonal stuff.
Yeah, it's the idea of like it's these traumatized people, they just want love, but they just cannot feel safe enough to do that. So they
Mhm.
do it in a way that is fundamentally messed up to well-adjusted people, right? But it's him being like, "What do you mean? I loved you. I did this," and it's just like you're emotionally stunted.
Yeah, like
That's not love.
that's
That's
not how you show
manipulation.
that. And but
Yeah.
yeah, and I like that what you just said about feeling safe enough. That was just recently in the Mr. and Mrs. Smith show with
Hmm.
Donald Glover, like hearing, you know, you feel like he's being a jerk. He just needs to know that him showing you love isn't going to be rejected. Like
Yes.
he needs to feel that safety.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's fair to you is up to you. But like
Mhm.
that is if you're engaging in in this relationship, that's what he needs.
Yeah, and in all relationships, it is the truest expression of love is when both people feel safe,
Yeah.
right? And what that looks like is very, very different, but Batman never feels safe, and that's why he always fumbles the ball. He's just
Hmm.
like, "Oh, you're getting too close. I'm gonna just push you away now." He always does shit like that, which is, how traumatized he actually is,
Yeah.
and it it's it is a very deeply really interesting character. Is he well socially adjusted? Do I want to know him in real life? Absolutely
No,
not.
yeah, that's the
Terrible
point
person
isn't
in
like,
real
oh,
life.
that's someone I would aspire to be in real life. It's just
Yeah,
this is an interesting character to analyze through the media that we get. And so that's
absolutely.
why I'm saying it's a bummer when you do Robin like this, because the whole point is
Hmm.
that he is the person that is able to make those connections, or at least
Hmm.
make himself vulnerable enough to enjoy the company and to look for the safety there. And even if it's not there, like with Batman,
Hmm.
to be like, well, I mean, I'm here and I like him, and like it's, I don't know, I think I get something from him.
Yep.
Or if you want to look at how he like works with Barbara Gordon in some
Hmm.
iterations when they're a couple, or Starfire when they're a couple,
Hmm.
um, it just makes sense to keep that about him. That
Yep.
unlike Bruce, he doesn't need you to show him the safety first. He will put himself out there.
Yep. He has he's supposed to have that emotional adjustment to be vulnerable first, like you said, and offer the olive branch in establishing a safe relationship.
Which is
Exactly.
the point of this. The point you would start the show where he's like, enough olive branches, Bruce, I'm out.
Yeah. I've given you too many opportunities. I've given you all this kind of stuff, and you just keep taking advantage. You keep taking from me. That is something that is a dynamic that is very, very good. Where he gets to does not make sense in this at all. It's an overcorrection from that fallout, which makes sense. But the idea of him not actually moving anywhere towards the end of the season to me is baffling.
Yeah,
that is something that I'm just like, this is still interesting, but is it good? No, there's no character evolution through the first season, and that really sucks for Robin. It really, really does.
But as I said, I'm sure there's people who don't feel as strongly about how Robin should be portrayed that enjoy it, and I'm not trying to say that they're wrong or that I'm right. It's just,
right.
Like I said at the top, I just wanted to give context for why I bumped up against it so much.
Yeah.
And hopefully in a way that doesn't make it seem like I think it was wrong to do it this way. It just didn't work for me.
Yeah, and I fall into that camp of people that you're referring to, in the sense where it's like, oh yeah, I can definitely say I like this version of Robin a lot more because it's more interesting to me than any other version of Robin that I've seen in the past.
Look, if you're talking about live action Robins, he's definitely the best.
Yeah, like that's not setting the bar too high because there hasn't been that many, but it's the idea of like, this show is interesting to me. It's dug in the fish hook with the idea of like, oh, we're really exploring psyche here. We're really exploring the fallout of traumas and all these kind of things. This is great to me. But is it a good characterization of Robin? Do I want to stay with this version of Robin? No, I do not. I want him drastically to move to Nightwing as fast as possible. Like, it's just like a full season with no character growth hurts me so much. Yeah. It sucks. I'm like, what are we doing? Are we doing Batman? Let's just do Batman, because that's what Batman is. It's no character growth whatsoever. It's just him being able to adapt in situations and him reinforcing his worldview. That's not what I want out of another character. I just want one character to have that. I want this character to grow and get his shit together and be a better version of himself. So I hope in season 2, I'm probably sure that, because I think he gets his Nightwing suit toward the end of that season, not the beginning of it, which is rough because now we're dealing with a superhero show where we don't have a suit for a while. I don't like that.
But
I dislike that a lot.
There's other characters, there's flashbacks, so you don't have to. It's not like the whole time he's out of costume. It's just he doesn't have that Nightwing costume for the majority of that season. But let's rate this season. I'm going to give it a 6, and I'm assuming you'll give it much higher.
Not much higher, but like a 7.
Okay, that's fair.
I objectively recognize all the issues with this show, and that's how I feel about Robin. I'm like, I didn't like the cheery version of Robin, but I don't like this either. I just think this is more interesting than the cheery version. Yeah. So I'm with it more often, and I'm with it a little bit more, and can't wait to see where the series actually takes me. Plus, the idea that I saw one of my friends, he does stunts in 2 episodes, and this is like, oh, good for him.
Nice.
I'm glad Emerson got those roles. I'm glad. It sucks like he gets killed in both those scenes, but
he got to come
it is what it is
after the first one.
Yeah, he was a gangster and then he became a cop.
There we go. And yeah, if anyone knows me personally, yes, my cousin will be Robin related in season 3.
Yeah,
as Tim Drake's dad, which still blows my mind that he plays a non-toddler person's father. But here we are. But that's not next season. That's 3rd season. What do I normally say here? I say things like, thank you very much for listening. We're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network with other great shows like Bad Game Movies, Contra Zoom Pod, Springfield Googleplex. So please go to thatshelf.com. You'll find those shows, our shows, and more shows. So do that. And if you want to hear older episodes of our show that you can't find on thatshelf.com, you can go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten, or hit up your favorite podcast platform and you'll find us. If you don't, then you can get in touch with us by going to @TDFSpoiled on Instagram, Twitter, and Threads. And you can email us at spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. So you've got options, but otherwise, please rate, review, share with your friends, subscribe, follow, do all that great stuff on the podcast platforms, and engage with us on the social media platforms I have mentioned. All right. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.